Welcome to Touching is Good. I'm Daniel, and this is LostMagic. When the DS was announced, one of the genres I was most excited to play on it was real-time strategy. I'd become a huge fan of RTS games in the late 90s, enjoying the likes of Command & Conquer, Total Annihilation, Warcraft 2 and whatever else I could get my hands on. Now, RTSs have traditionally been a PC genre, and while some attempts to bring the genre to consoles had worked, such as the underrated Warlocked on Game Boy Color and the Pikmin series on GameCube, most were met with mixed results. A controller just really wasn't a suitable substitute for a mouse and keyboard for quickly ordering your troops around. That changed with the DS. With the touchscreen, you could now easily select your troops and order them to do as you pleased. I honestly thought it would be a foregone conclusion that the RTS would find a home on the DS and we would be seeing ports of games like StarCraft and Red Alert in no time. Funny thing is though, that didn't really happen. However, throughout its lifetime, the DS did receive a small but decent amount of games in the genre. One of the first of them was LostMagic. Developed internally by Taito, LostMagic was released in January 2006 for Japan, and the rest of the world would be receiving it later in April. It wasn't the first RTS on the DS, and to call it a pure RTS would be unfair, as it's more of a hybrid RTS RPG. The basic plot of the game is that of a young wizard named Isaac, who is on a quest to save the world from the Diva of Twilight and find out the fate of his father, the Sage of Light, Russell, which has to be one of the most bland sounding names for a wizard in any game since Brian in Holy Magic Century on the Nintendo 64. Early on, he encounters a strange red-haired girl named Trista Wendell, who accompanies him on his quest and helps him along the way. Throughout the game, Isaac will slowly master powerful magics his staff allows him to wield, capture and control various monsters encountered in the game, and learn the origin of the world and finally come face to face with the Diva of Twilight. It's really a standard JRPG plot with nothing too in-depth or earth-shattering, but it's a fun story nonetheless and keeps things going at an okay pace. Where the game really shines though is in its gameplay. Now, battles take place either randomly as you navigate around the map or story-based when you get to an event indicated on the overworld. In battles, Isaac is basically your commander unit. He has access to a large variety of magic spells that you can cast using the touchscreen. As you progress through the game, you'll obtain new runes which will allow you to cast more spells. Each spell is cast by drawing out the required rune on the screen. Early on in the game, you unlock the ability to cast more complex spells by drawing multiple runes and combining them together. By the end of the game, you'll have access to a total of 396 spells. The spells take the form of your usual RPG fare: magic missiles, healing spells, buffs and debuffs, and so on. The magic system is a lot of fun and great use of the touchscreen, however I did find it somewhat frustrating to get some of the more complex runes working, which can be a pain in a particularly tight battle. Many times in a few of the missions I did have issues pulling off the teleporting spell when trying to get out of harm's way, just due to not drawing the rune exactly as required. Another issue is that with having so many spells to choose from, you'll hardly use most of them. Honestly, outside of a core few that I used most of the time, I ignored the rest. Arguably the most important spell Isaac has access to is a spell he learns early in the game that allows him to capture monsters to use. The monsters must first be weakened before you can trap them, but once you've captured the monster, you can use it in a later battle. More powerful monsters will require more work to capture, but the results can be quite rewarding with some of the higher level beasties. Between battles, you can alter your monster lineup, swap out old ones with new ones, or switch out for a monster that's more suitable for the battle. You can also equip your monsters with items that will make them stronger, faster, or more resistant to attack. Each monster unit has a number assigned to it called unit points. Weaker monsters have a lower unit point, and the stronger ones obviously have a higher one. And you have a set limit to the total unit points you can choose to fill out your 3 available monster slots. It's a great bit of strategy and it forces you to mix things up a bit with what you take into battles with you, so you can't just take your powerhouse units. In battle you select units by either tapping the unit or circle selecting for a whole group. Then simply touch on the screen where you want them to go and they'll head in that direction. If you tap on an enemy, your group will head towards them and do battle. Now, this is one of the major gripes I had with the game, in that pathfinding is non-existent. Your units will move in the exact direction you've ordered them to. If there is some obstacle in the way, instead of moving around it, they will just keep walking into it until you command them otherwise. It's pretty rough and requires a lot of babysitting to move units around some of the stages, and makes things even worse with another thing that I had an issue with in battle: the time limit. Most battles will have a 5-minute time limit, with some of the more larger scaled ones having a 10-minute one. And while this may seem like a lot, for an RTS where there is a lot going on, it's easy to find yourself running out of time. A few missions I found myself failing, not because I was doing poorly, but because I just ran out of time to do everything I needed to do. Now I do get the need for a time limit. If there wasn't one, it'd just be too easy to fight and heal and just sort of tank your way through the game. And the time limit does keep you moving and always thinking, but I do think it should have been a bit more lenient and allowed more time. Most battles will have a simple goal, such as defeat all the monsters, but some will require you to purify all the mana crystals on the map, which is done by moving either Isaac or a monster that is able to purify crystals right next to him. Mana crystals, by the way, can be used as an area to heal your units. Other missions will require you to defeat a boss, usually an enemy mage. Some battles are found to have an almost puzzle-like feel to them, requiring you to not only select your best monsters, but to take the ones best suited for the environment they're in, such as water-typed ones which will move quicker over water, or fire-types which are immune to lava, and so on. The battles have a lot going on and a good degree of strategy. Overall, I found the game to be quite hard in some of the later stages, and even after I'd fully leveled up Isaac, some of the levels took several playthroughs just to complete. That said, it never feels too hard, and most of the times I could always see how I failed, and that if I just kept working at it, or got the right monster type for the battle, I'd be able to get past it, other than frustrating pathfinding at times. LostMagic is pretty much how I expected an RPG to play on the DS. You control the camera with the D-pad or the face buttons for lefties, and the stylus to easily select and command your unit. The top screen is used for a map and unit info, which lets you keep an eye on all the action, even if you are focused on something else. Having Isaac as this awesome spellcaster amongst all your monsters is just a nice touch, and like the spells add a nice little bit of extra detail to the strategy of the game. Now, as for the graphics, they look good. All the in-game sprites have a nice, great 16-bit JRPG look to them. The variety of monsters is okay, although it does seem to venture into the same sprite, different colour territory for monsters a bit too much for my liking. Character art is by a Japanese animator by the name of Yoshiro Sato, who previously worked on some films for Studio Ghibli such as My Neighbor Totoro, Kiki's Delivery Service, Poco Rosso, among others, and you can kind of see it in the character designs as they do seem to share a somewhat Ghibli quality. All the areas look good and well drawn, and the worst I could say about the game is that at times things do look a bit bland and there's nothing really special to make it stand out from the mix. The music and sound effects are okay, some of the tracks are quite good, however there just isn't enough variety to them, and after a few hours it does get a bit repetitive. But there is nothing that I would say is outright bad. LostMagic will take you around 10 hours to finish, and there are multiple endings that rely on one or two choices you make in the game, if you're inclined to go back and play it again. There is also local multiplayer if you can find someone else who has a copy of the game, and you can do battle against each other using monsters you've unlocked. Also, at its release it did support online multiplayer, however as with all Wi-Fi connection games that is long gone. A spiritual successor called Tactive Magic was released in Japan in 2009 from the Nintendo Wii, using the Wii Remote pointer controls in place of the touchscreen for commanding your troops. It looks really good from all the footage I've seen of it, and seems to be one of the lost late era Wii games we missed out on. Also, there was announced a sequel for smartphones called LostMagic Concerto for the Fallen in September of 2009. However, I can't find much info on the game outside of a few screenshots from when it was announced, so I'm not even sure if it ended up coming out. So that's about all there is to really say about LostMagic. Over the DS's 10-year life, it got several other RTSs, a few of which I'll get to later on. As a starting point for RTSs on the DS though, LostMagic is good, and it's pretty much what I wanted from a simplified RTS on the DS. Sure, it's not perfect and it's a little rough around the edges, but there's a lot of fun to be had here and a pretty good challenge. If you pick it up, you'll find a very rewarding, albeit sometimes frustrating game.